Well, I guess the official talking is over. Ryan Day and players at Big Ten Media Days on Wednesday. We talk all the time, nonstop, about the Buckeyes. Here, of course, Kevin Noon, Tony Gerdeman, and Steve Hellwagon. Catch Tony on Buckeye Huddle. We'll hear more about that. Steve Hellwagon, of course, at 247 Sports. Bucknuts, how you guys doing today?
Doing great.
Doing good.
All right.
Doing well.
Steve, we'll tee off with you. Big Ten Media Days, what did you take from it? I saw your shining smile a few times on the Big Ten Network.
Yeah, it's amazing the reach that the network has. Everybody I know was sending me screenshots. And, I deliberately asked Commissioner Warren a 20-second question so I could be on national television for as long as I possibly could. And same with Frosty the Snowman, and I think my other one was to Ryan Day. So, yeah, it was I thought Ohio State really put their best foot forward. I thought that the players all came off very professional in dealing with the media. And I guess with CJ Stroud, what I would say was a year ago, he seemed kind of tentative, almost unsure of himself at times talking to the media. And part of that would be like he would say, I'm a great player, or that kind of thing. And he tried to convince himself that he really is a great player. And yesterday he was completely at ease. He talked about being a leader for the entire football team, having the offensive line and the defense over to his house and making them food. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba was very striking to me. People said, you could win the Fred Biletnikoff Award as the top wide receiver in the country, which I think he's going into the season at number 1 or number 2 on that list based on the Rose Bowl alone and the 90 catches he had last year. Or dare we say you could win the Heisman Trophy, as an Ohio State opponent, Devontae Smith, at wide receiver, did just 2 years ago for Alabama. And he's like, that's all well and good, but the one trophy I would like to hoist the most is the national championship trophy. So he really put it out there and didn't back away from his thoughts of saying, this is what we want to accomplish this coming season. And so when you have your two leaders, your two very, very best two players on your team are this bought in to what's going to happen, I take this as only a good sign. And I just get the sense that something special could potentially happen with Ohio State this season. I mean, we've thought it all along because of all the magazines and the hype and the guys they've got coming back, and we're still a month away from the first game. But everything I saw and heard from those two and Ronnie Hickman and Ryan Day kind of led me to believe that something special is in the works here.
Yeah, they were loose. They seemed to be, having a good time. I mean, we certainly have talked to players about Big Ten Media Days, and it's like, I'm going because I have to go. It's not necessarily, that it's like, I just want to go. I mean, yeah, you get to go and have a steak dinner, have some shrimp cocktail, maybe go out and get a new suit to be able to go do the event. But now in the days of NIL too, I mean, this is just a great chance for you to put yourself on display. I mean, everybody was loose. I mean, it was a lot of great stuff. I spent most of my time with Jackson Smith-Njigba during the player portion. I did sit in for the full hour of Ryan Day. Had the chance to listen a lot there. One of the big things I took away from Jackson Smith-Njigba was him talking about. I asked him about Cam Babb. And, he certainly had a challenging career with the Buckeyes, but he seems to be such a pivotal part of things. And he's like, absolutely. And, he confirmed that he's healthy and ready to go. And I said, would you be willing to give up a couple of passes to let Cam eat? And he's like, absolutely. Absolutely. And CJ Stroud, he also echoed in on something when he was asked about Cam Babb. So, it's just, things are loose. Granted, fall camp has not started yet. They're not getting, going through the pain that can be fall camp. So we'll see if those smiles are the same here in about a week. But overall, a great trip to to Indianapolis to talk football. And, hard to believe that we are as close to the season as we are, inside of 30 days of 0 week, which Ohio State doesn't take part in 0 week, but we certainly are going to get to watch some football.
Darn straight. Yeah. Camp breaks and camp starts in 1 week for Ohio State. I was like Steve, a little, I don't know, surprised, caught off guard, impressed by how loose and talkative and conversational CJ Stroud was. Like he's
like a different person.
Yeah. He was in command of the table. And I attributed that to just going through last season and becoming a leader and improving himself on the field. But then also, now that you guys are talking, I'm wondering also how much of that growth is also because of the NIL stuff, where he's shaking hands and kissing babies and doing a lot of talking through all of the NIL stuff. And all of this has made him a much more mature person. And it's funny to say he's more mature now because he's joking with people. It's, it's not contradictory. It's something you watch him and he's asking people questions. He's engaged, he's engaging, and he's not a timid redshirt freshman that is, yes, sir, no, sir. First, let me thank God. Like he was very just rudimentary and, everything was kind of rote last year for him. And this year he can go off the cuff and just interesting. These are the things you kind of take note of before any of the play starts, because this is all we have at this point. So, I thought that was interesting. I think it was interesting that, Ryan Day and talking about defensive recruiting, which is not going super well right now, saying that recruits kind of need to see the defense in action to know what they're getting into. They lose Caleb Downs, a 5-star safety, to Alabama this week. So this is one of those things where Alabama, everybody that is a recruit knows what that's going to be, what the Alabama defense is going to be. Recruits talking to Ohio State's defensive coaches right now, they only know what they're being told, and there's no proof of it out there yet. And it's something we talked about on my podcast, Buckeye Weekly Podcast today. It'll drop later. Nice plug. But like the theory versus testimony right now, it's just theory for the Ohio State defense, and it's showing up in the defensive recruiting. And the testimony will have to come after the season or during the season when recruits finally get to see it. So it was interesting that Ryan Day addressed that and talked about it and how, the coaches are out recruiting and they're doing things and they're working hard, but it's understandable if recruits are still out there thinking, well, I still want to see it before I'll believe it.
Tony, here's your second opportunity for a nice plug. Buckeye Huddle next to your name. Tell us about that.
Yeah, a new venture, BuckeyeHuddle.com. The site will launch in hopefully in the next week. The message board is live though right now, so if you go there, it's completely free for the moment as we construct the site. But we're all there hanging out. It's me, it's Mark Givler, it's Alex Gleitman, it's Tom Orr, Ross Fulton. We got more guys there as well, more guys coming, and so check it out. Like I said, it's free right now. Hang out, ask some questions. We're all there talking. And so very excited to do that, to get back out on the beat, get back to the games, and continue to stay here, Mark, talking Ohio State football.
We'd like to hear that.
There might be a big free agent signing in the offing one of these days too, is what the rumor was in Indianapolis, that there could be one more big addition down the line, potentially.
We shall see.
We shall see. Okay.
We'll be waiting for that. And Steve has directed everyone to leave their comments and questions there in the live chat. We will get to them. When Ryan Day was hanging out with the Big Ten Network guys, they were just hammering him on the defensive side of the ball, which maybe I just have it stuck in my head from some of the conversations we've had here and seeing this elsewhere, but mostly from here, that it always runs through my mind when Ryan Day is addressing the defense, his engagement, his involvement, and I'm not discarding that. I'm just saying I question that and I process that and I really listen more intently for his answers on the defensive side of the ball. And that's really where they hit him up. The one thing that comes to mind is him talking about the selection of Jim Knowles and saying, we didn't necessarily want to go for the hotshot coach that was going to be passing by for a year or two and headed off, and he cited Jeff Hafley. But we wanted a guy that we really believed was going to be here for the long term and really wanted to make Columbus a destination.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's talking about Manny Diaz going to Penn State, and under normal circumstances, that would be the talk of the conference. And I don't think I heard anybody. Granted, I didn't spend a lot of time talking to Penn State people in Indianapolis, but nobody was talking about that. I mean, Jim Knowles is somebody who, he's had head coaching time. He's been able to do a lot of different things, and I don't see him being somebody who goes the Jeff Hafley route, fixes it in a year, and then is off to his next venture. I mean, he's certainly being compensated very well, just shy of $2 million. And it's not, I mean, when he went to Oklahoma State, it was not, an immediate fix. It wasn't like year one, suddenly they went from being not very good to being top 10, top 15, top 20. It took several years. But at Ohio State, he's going to have a different caliber of player to work with, and that's no disrespect to what was going on at Oklahoma State. It's just the reality of what Ohio State's going to be able to recruit versus what Oklahoma State's going to be able to recruit. And it'll be interesting to just to see how quickly these changes are. But Ronnie Hickman was very complimentary of everything that is going on. I mean, they've been able to come in and bring in several support guys that were part of the system, whether it was at Duke or whether it was at Oklahoma State. And, Ryan Day said, up at the podium, I expect this to be a top 10 defense. So that's the expectations. I mean, I expect to win Mega Millions, and then somebody else can fill in for me on this show if I win $1 billion. I may do an occasional show from an island retreat somewhere, not to be named, but, the expectations are there. This is not just a matter of, we just want to get incrementally better. No, they want to be the best at everything that they do.
Yeah, something else. I wrote a little bit about this yesterday with this the defensive struggles. From 2018 to 2020, Ohio State signed 35 defensive players. None of them have been all Big Ten players. Only 4 of them have done as much as be second team all Big Ten. And 3 of those are on the defensive line: Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith, and Tommy Togiai. The 4th is Ronnie Hickman last year. That's a lot of striking out and recruiting. That's a lot of non-development. That's a lot of injuries that have cost some of those guys entire seasons and multiple seasons. And a lot of those guys from like 2018 class are now to the point this year where they're healthy. This is their last chance. So they can change that all Big Ten status that they've been missing out on, but that's a long stretch to go with recruiting that poor, that the development that poor, where so many things have gone wrong defensively. And when that many things go wrong defensively, you end up losing your coaches. I think they bounced back with last year's class. See if they bounce back with this year's class and try to catch up with next year's class.
Yeah, I think in some regards, this will be a transitional season for the defense as Coach Knowles tries to get his scheme established. And at the same time, you don't have time to have a transitional season with the defense. You need it to be a great season for the defense. And I think it'll be much improved. One, because most of the guys are back and they'll be a year older, bigger, stronger, smarter, faster. So that's good. But 2, I think the scheme's going to make a lot more sense and is going to fit the opponent, and it's going to fit the personnel much better than it did last year. So really, it kind of comes down to this, and I harp on this every week. If you get good play out of your defensive line to set the tone for the rest of the defense, it'll all fall into place. They just haven't had that the last 2 years, really, from top to bottom and side to side. So they need to get back to that this season.
Yakov 22, Kevin and Tony are transformational, not transactional. I like what you did there, Yakov. Very nice.
We can be both.
Before we get to the team up north, Kevin Warren addressed diversity and inclusion, of course, expansion and realignment. Those were the 2 main themes that come to mind for me. When Steve had the mic, I know you wanted to get some figures out of him, Steve. You wanted to get some dollar figures out of this Los Angeles coup that they were able to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, I took a shot, whatever. I said, if you want to ballpark us, it's fine. We'll take a ballpark figure. What I was angling for is why was this such a great deal for Purdue, Illinois, Ohio State, all the old guard, the existing Big Ten, and even Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers? Why was this such a no-brainer to fly athletes in all these sports all over the country? Barry Alvarez got up on the dais and spoke yesterday for about a half hour, and he had some very illuminating things to say. He said each of these schools in the Big Ten averages 24 sports. Ohio State's got 36, I believe, that they sponsor varsity sports in. And it's funny, we were looking at USC's program, and obviously they've got a great baseball program. We were joking that the baseball standings in the future will read USC, UCLA, and then everybody else. And I think it was Kevin or somebody. We were sitting, maybe it was Dave, my buddy Dave Biddle. We're sitting in one of the places reading what the future Big Ten champions list will look like on an annual basis. USC, UCLA, USC, for baseball. But because they could play it year round and nobody else in their league can. So, but again, you can put that in a thimble and that'll tell you what it means in the overall picture of why they did this. And they did it so that each of the existing schools will probably realize an increase of anywhere from $5 to $20 million a year additional on top of what they're already making. And of course, they're also on the cusp of having this new television deal that we could learn about theoretically any day. I mean, they could come out and say, whatever year this ends, I think their first Michigan game was 17, I think, because the 16 game was on ABC or ESPN or ABC. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Well, maybe does it kick in next year? I don't know. Yeah, this must be the last year of the deal. So they got to announce that, I think, here in the next few weeks, what they're going to do starting forward with that. And it sounds like, you read all the tea leaves that Fox is like, they may change their name to Big Ten. That's how embedded they are with the Big Ten. Fox, and then CBS could be a part of this, which would be, great for me because our company is owned by CBS. We might get a little home field advantage a little bit out of that. Big Ten Network will obviously continue to be a part of it. The question is whether ESPN is going to be a part of it. And then there'll be a streaming component. Amazon or Apple or somebody may get a weekly game, maybe a Friday one-off game every week or something. I mean, now you're going to have weeks where you'll have as many as 8 Big Ten conference games being played in some of these weeks, and those are all important matchups. I mean, I know Rutgers, Minnesota is not really all that important in the overall scheme of things, but from a conference standpoint, every game that's branded as a Big Ten game is an important telecast. And I think that they need to be handled and treated in a certain way. And I think that, I have no doubt that whatever this new deal is when it kicks in is going to be, mega millions for these schools. And my last thought is if they had a deal in place or in principle that this 11th hour edition of USC and UCLA is caused Kevin Warren to go back and scribble in the margins in some red ink, we're going to need another $20 million for this.
Steve, it's not about the money. It's never been about the money. It's about the student athletes, and it's about the fans and the alumni being able to see games. That's all. You're tainting everything by talking about the money. Is the money nice? Of course, and it spends well. I do think it's interesting the once you have the LA market in, sure, that's good. But you also you'll have night games in November, which I think it will be good for the Big Ten as well. You can have night games all season long. We know right now in November, basically no Big Ten night games. So that's a month where you're not part of the primetime schedule. So you'll have Fox will probably have a 3-hour pregame by that point. So they'll start 9 a.m. and they may have the nightcap at 10:30 or whatever. So you're going to have Big Ten football from 9 a.m. until 2 a.m. however many Saturdays, 12 Saturdays, 13 Saturdays a year at that point. And that's, say what you want about Big Ten. That's pretty exciting for the conference, for alumni, where you're going to have 4 television windows and you can watch Big Ten football in every single one of them. And if you need a palate cleanser, you can go watch yourself some SEC football if you need. If you're not really into the Indiana-Rutgers matchup, go ahead and watch Alabama against Georgia if that's your cup of tea. For me in my house, we are watching Rutgers and Indiana. Thank you very much.
Of course. Well, the other, as the whistle blows, Steve.
I can't figure out how to mute myself, so
You're fine. So Kevin Warren also addressed the media rights in regards to the connection to the playoff. And I really didn't come to this conclusion last year when the playoff proposal was, hit a challenge and was put down by the other conferences, and the SEC was not too happy about that. But that the media rights, that they are now looking for an exclusive TV rights deal, meaning ESPN dominating the next stretch of college football playoffs, and they want to see a distribution, something close to what the NFL does, where you see various playoff games on different networks and the championship game rotated in some way. All right.
Well, I'll take that if nobody else wants to. Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons the Big Ten and the ACC kind of slowed things down, is because if they would have been negotiating for the playoff package, you're just negotiating with ESPN. So I like the fact that you're talking about spreading these out. Kevin Warren coming out and saying he's going to soften his stance on automatic qualifiers. I wonder how much that has to do with the fact that with the Big Ten being a larger conference now and perhaps expanding even more, automatic qualifiers don't really do that much, and they may actually be holding a Big Ten team out of the playoffs, with somebody else like a Pac-12 automatic qualifier perhaps holding a Big Ten third team out of the playoffs. So of course he's no longer interested in that. This 16 team thing that we keep hearing more and more about is interesting to me, where maybe you eliminate the conference championships altogether, and that allows you to play a 16-team playoff as you would a 12-team playoff with a first round, second round on campuses. So I think there's some just hearing about the 16-team playoff kind of out of nowhere caught me a little bit off guard, and I think maybe we might want to pay a little bit of attention to that, especially if Kevin Warren is now saying, yeah, winning a conference championship as an automatic qualifier isn't such a big deal to me anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of dollars there that you can play with. And, I was reading something from one of the expansion guys out there on social media this morning about we could see things going in another direction. We could see not only a conference championship game, we could see semifinal games in the conference, and that you could push everything through that way. And how does that fit into the structure, and how does that work? I mean, they know that they have a printing press, that they can just print money, and it's just going to be a matter of finding out a way that they can get every last drop of it out of there. I mean, players are getting compensated. If players start to suddenly see profit sharing or revenue split from these deals or whatever, suddenly I don't think it's going to be as much of a case of, well, maybe we're overtaxing these guys. The only place they're going to be getting overtaxed is from the federal government. When it comes to the universities, they're going to be like, well, now welcome to the party, pal, and we're going to sit there and you might be seeing a 16-game season or something when you wrap everything together, or whatever it may end up being. So, I think with every passing day, we realize the more we learn, the less we know, is where we stand.
I'm back. My train went through, and I think about so many changes that are going to happen. And the other leagues, when the SEC grabbed up Texas and Oklahoma, they hit the pause button on the playoff. And they're like, whoa, what does this mean? Do we really want to go to 8 teams so that these guys can have 3? Whoa, hold on. And what's interesting, I put up my consensus poll the other day, and the way the votes shook out, you think Clemson is considered one of the top 4, but I think there was some uncertainty with Clemson in the eyes of some of these top 25s that I put in there from different sites and magazines. And when I mashed all these numbers together, it was Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, and Texas A&M was 4. So, and that would never happen in real life because you just don't suppose that would happen. But I mean, 2 of those teams would be guaranteed losses, if not all 3 of them from the SEC. So I don't know. It's interesting, but now that the Big Ten has struck out on its own and added 2 teams to get to 16, now you've got Gene Smith out here talking about a 16-team playoff. And the immediate reaction from people was, you're only sold out right now for your Notre Dame and your Michigan games. Good luck selling tickets to any game once you have a 16-team playoff, because there's not one single game on that schedule that you would say is do or die at some point that's going to knock you out of the playoff, other than the Michigan game, which is always, a sellout game anyway. But any game up till that point really is not going to be the end-all be-all. You don't have to win the Big Ten now to get in the playoff or to guarantee yourself of a playoff spot. So I don't know. We are in for a world of change, and I don't know what's going to solve it. Just kind of dream weaving. Kevin and I were talking about in Indianapolis at lunch about how they could play 10 conference games as going up from 9, but then you would have a lot of years where some of these schools would only have 6 home games. And now you're giving back, for Ohio State's standpoint, a $10 or $15 million windfall of, not playing Alabama A&M, or whoever, or in this case, Toledo or Arkansas State, because you've got to have a 5th Big Ten road game that year or whatever. And so there's going to be a lot of push-pull on this. If it's part of the 12-game season, is the 11th game going to become the Michigan game? The 12th game would become the Final Four of the Big Ten. And as we saw in the COVID year, the schools that didn't make the championship game got to play another game, basically a lame duck game, where maybe 5 plays 6 or 7 plays 8 and so on. And, how do you slot those games after that? And and then the winners of the 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3 games play on the neutral field for the conference championship. We are in for a ton of change, and whatever we have accepted for college football over the years is about to change in very dramatic fashion. The Rose Bowl, what's going to happen? Are the Big Ten and the Pac-12 still on talking terms to even have a partnership with the Rose Bowl? That's a huge question. After the next 2 years, you figure they'll play out the string these next 2 years with the current New Year's 6 college football playoff format. But after that, when it goes to an 8 or even a 16-team playoff, how do the bowls fit into that playoff? Are they used as quarterfinal games, semifinal games? They've kind of taken the championship game away from the major bowls. They've had it a couple of years. Their cities have had it. They're having it in Los Angeles this year, but not at the Rose Bowl, of all places. So whatever. We are in for whatever passed for college football in the past is going to look dramatically different, I think, in the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, you talk about the Alabama A&M game and you not being able to sell tickets. I mean, we've already seen what happens with that Alabama A&M game or Culinary Institute of America or Ringling Brothers Clown College. I mean, those games don't move anyway, and you kind of are stuck with where you are, and it's just going to be a matter of where the dollars are coming from. And ultimately, the people that might end up getting caught in the wash there are the local businesses that count on the economic impact of the game, because the school's going to get theirs, and the school's going to need their money even more because they're going to be competing against athletes directly who are getting NIL money. They're only, in my opinion, it's truly just a finite amount of dollars that are out there that are going to get donated somewhere. And if the money's going to the foundations or the money's going to the athletes through these deals, the university's got to get theirs when they can. So I think that's the reason why we're seeing some more aggressiveness out of the conferences and the schools in terms of trying to make sure that they keep their cash flow operational.
I think one other thing, if the Big Ten and the SEC future components right now, 32 schools between those two leagues, and then whatever else we want to consider at that power 3, 4, 5 level, how that's all going to shake out. I think they'd be paying the players now if they could. Although Barry Alvarez again came back and said, we can't possibly pay everybody in all these sports, that it just isn't going to work out, at least under their current revenue streams. I don't know. I think that's a bunch of malarkey. You need a $14 million head football coach like you need a hole in the head. But I think that if they could break away, they would. But the issue is, how do you then schedule non-conference against Cincinnati? Well, Cincinnati will be in the Big 12. Toledo, Temple, those mid-major football schools who aren't paying their players. There'll be a tremendous difference. The MAC won't be able to pay anybody. That type of school, it widens the gap, which we already knew there's a huge gap anyway. And then the other thing is the NCAA basketball tournament, where they're all kind of joined at the hip on that, although basketball is like 1/20th of the overall thought process in this whole thing. I mean, Kevin Warren jumped at this deal without the first thought that he's going to send the Rutgers lacrosse team to USC. I mean, that thought never even crossed his mind in this entire thing. He was, more concerned about education, as we heard him, ramble on there for about 45 minutes. So, missing class time, not a problem, guys, And what they don't talk about is, a lot of virtual classes now. They could take those flights while they're on the plane, the 8-hour flight, to and from.
I love the idea of a wild card weekend during the semifinal games, or even possibly during the semifinal games and the championship game. So let's put it this way. If we're going with a 10-game conference schedule, you play 8 games, you determine your seedings, and the final 4 move on to play their semifinals for the conference championship, and everybody else plays
maybe 2 wild card games.
Yeah, maybe 2 wild card games, because I just love the thought of, we have no idea who's playing the last 2 weekends of the season. And maybe to make it fair, I would think one weekend you would seed the best versus the worst, second best versus second worst, and I'm talking about the non-playoff games, and
then reseed it 3 versus 4.
Yeah, the next week,
the last week. That makes sense. If I don't think you necessarily need to or want to see a rematch in those non-seeded games. I mean, if you can avoid rematches, that would be great. I don't know if that's what they did that COVID year when they did that. I know that some of the schools had dumped out altogether, so it was kind of hard to find, Michigan, some of the schools that, were still playing football deep into December at that point. But, whatever. I liked Rutgers' standpoint. They took that bowl game last year on like 8 days notice, and Greg Schiano got up there and was asked about guys who opted out of that. And he's like, heck, for some guys who thought, they were pro training and whatever, it wasn't a begrudge against them for not coming to play in a game that they had already, they'd already checked out on Rutgers football. It wasn't that big of a thing. Bully to them for going and playing that game and, whatever.
No doubt. Then also, of course, the money is the impetus for all these decisions and all these new plans, but the larger the league, the more it almost necessitates semifinal games, because if you just have a championship game and you've got an 18 or 20 team league, you've got all these scenarios in which you can't logically, reasonably determine who's going to be in the championship game because the teams aren't playing each other. All right, from the big picture to the granular. Brady asking if you guys think that Lathan Ransom will be ready for Notre Dame.
Ryan Day said they're going to ease him into camp, but he will eventually be full go. So I think right now, the expectation is that he will be ready for Notre Dame. But they don't necessarily know which position that'll be, whether it be strong safety or free safety. Day said he's working both of those, not working at nickel. So they've got to figure out what he can do in this defense because they have no idea. He's been out. He's just now getting running around for in terms of scheme wise. And once camp gets underway, then they'll figure out what he can do. And so, yeah, I think the plan is for him to be ready for Notre Dame, but that's probably a special teams and a backup situation because they know their starters for the most part. And I don't know that they really know exactly where Lathan Ransom is going to play yet. They may need him at free safety so that you don't have a true freshman Kai Stokes as the backup. But they also really like Kai Stokes, so maybe that's not a concern.
Yeah, the Ransom update was very good to hear that he's close. May not do 11-on-11 team right at the beginning, but maybe after a week or so would mix in there. There were a few other injury updates. The linebacker Mitchell Melton, who he'd also repped, I guess, a little bit at defensive end in the spring and was starting to show some stuff. He suffered, I think, a knee injury during the spring, and it doesn't sound like he'll be able to play this year because of that. But other than him, Ryan Day was very bullish on the idea that almost everybody else is ready to go. That includes Josh Proctor, although he came back a little bit and repped 11-on-11 in the spring, was even in the spring game for a few plays. So that was good that Josh Proctor is back in the fold at safety. And I think either he or Court Williams may start at the third safety position, however they work that out. Beyond those guys, Tyler Friday, a defensive lineman, you guys can correct my math. Did he miss all of last season due to injury?
Yeah, he was shut down like in fall
camp or
something. It was
defensive end for him, I think. Is that where he lines up? So he can only add to what they hope is a good defensive end group with Zach Harrison and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and everybody else there at defensive end. I think that's only good, especially since Potter transferred away, and Potter was looking kind of promising, I thought, in the spring, but he's gone. So I took that as good news that Friday, a veteran, will be back. Beyond that, Josh Fryer, who's probably their number 6 offensive lineman, and would you guys say probably their next guy up at tackle is going to be back for the start of preseason camp, it sounds like. I asked a pointed question about the offensive line yesterday to Coach Day, and he was like, yeah, we got to build depth, and we really like our starting 5, and 2 new starters there, and Paris Johnson, a returning starter, moving from guard to tackle. So there are some moving pieces and parts there, but so we'll see how it all comes together. But those were some of the newsy items that I thought came out of this. I can't think a whole lot about position changes, or you guys were listening to the same stuff I was listening to. Maybe something tripped your cord a little better than what I had on some of those.
I was going to say, no, nothing really newsy. I mean, that Ryan Day doesn't like to talk about injuries. Don't ask him about who's flashing for the the young guys, because if I forget somebody, I'm going to hear from their parents. I'm not going to want to deal with that. So we're
about to give him a blanket admonition that you can name names anytime you want, and nobody gives a crap if you left somebody out and you upset somebody's parents. Nobody cares. We need names.
Well, not in the era of the transfer portal. If you forget a name, they're out. They leave.
They're out. I mean,
you can't even speak names now.
If they go to unlimited transfers or whatever, and Ryan Day did speak about that and said that, he hadn't really had any conversations with Gene or anything, concrete, but would like to kind of see some guardrails in place there. Maybe a 2-year commitment, which would certainly limit some of this, jumping and hopping that we could potentially see. I mean, once again, the NC2A, well, we have this issue. You know what would be best for it? Less regulation, because then it's not on us to really have to worry about this. So we're seeing the overcorrection that isn't helping anybody at this point. But
Kevin Warren wanted Congress to get involved, and I sat there with our Iowa publisher who was next to me. I go, our federal government, like the one, like the American federal government, they want to involve in name, image, and likeness legislation for the NCAA schools. They are dysfunctional federal the one in Washington, D.C., that one, I'm not taking shots or sides at either political party. It's just the whole thing is a debacle and a disaster right now, a dysfunctional mess. And they want them to dictate policy. Be careful what you wish for, because then they're going to get into your books and realize, oh, this isn't right. There's a problem here. Why are you paying all these old men as head coaches these many millions of dollars and not paying these young athletes the money that they've earned? So I'd be careful what you wish for on that.
I completely agree with you, Steve. And even in addition to that, competency aside, let's take that for granted. They're competent. We'll say that, even though I don't agree with it either. It's going to take forever. It's going to take, they've got other things to do. They're worrying about 58 other issues, and this one's not an important one for them. So
$5 gas.
Forever. It's called red tape, bureaucracy. It's going to take forever. And also, it's not going to be effective.
We're driving to Indianapolis, and I'm looking at the big sign. I'm on a quarter of a tank. And I'm like, okay, what is it? What is it? 407? Nope. Keep going. When I left Grandview in Columbus, it was 357, and I made a mistake of not pulling over and filling the tank. I'm not even paying for it. I'm turning it into my company, but I'm trying to get the best deal I can possibly. It's just the frugal nature of my life that I'm looking for the best deal. I got clear to Springfield before I finally was like, well, hell, we're going to run out of gas. So we paid $4.30 a gallon in Springfield. I could have had it for 80 cents cheaper back in Grandview and Columbus. But I wasn't thinking. But yeah, they got bigger fish to fry than this. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
I think they can.
Go ahead, Tony.
Well, they can slide a bill into some sort of a infrastructure bailout or whatever. Just go ahead and throw that in there. Nobody is any the wiser, and then boom, it's done.
Well, this chip thing with the computers, they say that $50 billion of the $280 billion bill is going to go to the chip technology, infrastructure, whatever, and the other 230 billion is pork. And I'm like, what? Because you had to get everybody to agree to this thing for it to go through, and it hits us right here in Central Ohio. I am 10 miles from where they're going to put this Intel plant in for a $20 billion investment by Intel. And the computer chips right now, and again, you put what I know about this in a thimble, but it's the lack of computer chips right now is hamstringing the auto industry and everything else. And we've got Congress trying to come together on, feel good legislation to get the chip manufacturers to start doing it here in our country. We're going to overpay for that, first of all, and then tack on a bunch of stuff we don't need. Secondarily, yes, by all means, let's have these people solve all of our problems.
Are you new here? That's how it's worked always. I mean,
I know.
I'm trying. Hashtag.
Are you new?
I'm trying not to get there. I'm just sitting here with a slow burn, and football season is coming pretty quick. Who's excited to see Nebraska and Northwestern in Ireland? I mean, how many tickets are they going to sell to that game?
Let's not forget about Illinois and Wyoming. Got that one. And we've got a late night showdown with Vandy going to Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, how does Illinois get a week 0 game against Wyoming? That's one thought, because it really messes over Indiana, who doesn't have a game the week before they play. And that's one. And two, for this schedule creep, however they do it, with an extra round of playoffs or extra round of Big Ten, we were saying week 0 is going to become the new week 1. That you can tell by ramping up the number of week 0 games every year. They are greasing the skids to where now we're going to have 98-degree football on August 24th, and people keeling over because of heat exhaustion at some of these games, and $7 water to quench your thirst.
To answer your first question, I saw Brett Bielema saying he likes having week 0 games. So apparently he asked for it.
Well, he loves it this year because they get an advantage on Indiana. They work out all the
Exactly.
kinks, and Indiana's doing going on air.
You get to camp sooner, and then you get to he said the improvement from the first game to the second game is maybe the biggest improvement the entire year. So then, and it gives you a bye week, and it gives you several additional advantages that he likes. And Illinois, find every advantage and that you can and use them to any advantage you can get.
Well, everyone in the Big Ten apparently is going to need advantages this year because Jim Harbaugh has come out and said Michigan State, Ohio State, Big Ten championship, national championship. Bam.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it didn't happen last year, but,
we all say lots of things. It doesn't necessarily mean it happens. I mean, I'm trying to will that lottery win into existence. I mean, yes, they may have figured out, some things last year. It's, you can't take that away there, but how are they going to figure out losing Mike McDonald as DC? I mean, Jesse Minter and that stunning, stifling Vanderbilt defense. I mean, Jim Harbaugh did tell the story at media days that Minter was kind of the runner-up to the position, and he's had the advantage of being able to have a year of calling defensive plays. But he's going to be doing it on a defense that's not going to have Aiden Hutchinson, it's not going to have David Ojabo, it's not going to have Daxton Hill. According to the Phil Steele magazine, they have 4 returning starters on defense, and you can love Mazzie Smith, but how much is your nose tackle really going to sit there and define the identity of your team? So, we'll see. Michigan certainly has the schedule to be able to be very successful in most of its games, but we're kind of talking about the ones that are not already kind of predetermined at this point. So, yeah, it's fine. Everybody goes into media days saying this is going to be our year. We're going to accomplish all these goals, and it's a zero-sum game. And somebody wins the game and somebody loses the game.
Folks, we're at 180 on the line. If you go grab a friend or two, we get to 500 next week. How about that here at Ohio State Live on the Voice of College Football? We got a few more minutes here, and certainly want to let everyone know where they can find all these content creators. We'll start with Kevin.
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Kevin_Noon. As you can see, right. I'm not going to try and figure out what the mapping right there with the little bug in the bottom left corner. You can find me on my podcast show as well. Right now, I'm putting it all into the Best Noon Sports Show period. You can find that on my YouTube channel, and lots of stuff coming up here in the near future with that.
Tony.
Yeah, as you see there on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. New site, you can find me at new home, BuckeyeHuddle.com. Site hasn't officially launched yet, but our message board has. So if you go to BuckeyeHuddle.com, you'll see the message board there. Go ahead and register and start, chatting away, and we're all in there. So that's where you can find me.
Steve.
Yep, there it says, bucknuts.com and 24/7 Sports Network. And got my Twitter handle there, Steve Hellwagon. I'm working on a story right now about what the Big Ten coaches had to say about USC and UCLA coming into the league in 2024. And it was as if they were each handed a list of talking points to accentuate all the positive things about this. And what none of them ever brought up is that individually they are the highest paid public employees in each of their respective states. And that only figures to go up when there's more money coming in. They figured each probably make an extra $1 million a year off that deal over the life of it. So, they're smiling and whistling Dixie all the way to the bank. Those 6-hour flights to Los Angeles are worth an extra $1 million a year. Trust me. So, they're not going to be bummed out about it. PJ Fleck smiled and goes, LA, like that reaction that you have. LA is just this cool, mythical, idyllic place, and it's now Big Ten country. So, I guess I'll go along with that today. That's my thought on it. But again, I think there's a lot of good and some bad with this.
I don't know that Ryan Day was asked specifically about Michigan. I don't remember. He certainly talked about the disappointment of the season and kind of balancing not being down about 11-2 and winning the Rose Bowl, but that's not hitting the standard at Ohio State. I found more gems in the Jim Harbaugh side sessions and with the Big Ten Network crew. 50 minutes of a side session, not a whole lot there. That's not just typical him talking about how great his team is and how they're just the best young men that walk the face of the earth. But the last 90 seconds was explain your relationship with Ryan Day. What does that look like? And all he basically said was that it was cordial and that he wants to beat us and we want to beat them. And then he was, of course, he woke up standing on third base and thought he hit a triple line came up and he didn't take accountability of it. He just got a big grin on his face and said no comment and got up and that was that. There was also a comment made about NIL and Michigan's initiatives there. And Jim Harbaugh, when directed toward the $13 million figure thrown out by Ryan Day, said, we here at Michigan, why can't we just double that?
Why can't you?
Whatever.
Just go ahead. Yeah, it's so difficult to get good answers out of Jim Harbaugh, and then sometimes the best answers he gives you is no comment. And it's like, oh, personality. That's nice to see. So that there's some irony there. But yeah, that's the this is not going away. Him and Ryan Day, it's not going away. It's not just Ohio State, Michigan. Like Jim Harbaugh has made it personal with things he's said, and so now it becomes even more personal for Ryan Day. And so, yeah, I think this is perfect for the rivalry. I think it's healthy. It was interesting to me that Ryan Day was talking about how they talk about Michigan all the time, but they don't want to focus on it too much so that they don't lose the game twice or so that Michigan doesn't beat them twice. So it's an interesting balance. I don't know quite how you do it, where you talk about it all the time, but don't talk about it too much. And then you try to find the right balance. I guess we'll find out if they do it this year, but it's just an interesting dichotomy between the focus of it and then also don't look directly at it. I guess it's like these 3D pictures that I cannot ever see where it's just dots. Like, well, yeah, you look right at it, but don't look directly at it. Don't focus on it, but you look directly at it. And I think eventually Ryan Day and the Ohio State team will be looking at Michigan and they'll see, I don't know, a sailboat or something.
Brock Glenn is a Memphis, Tennessee quarterback, top 20 in the nation, who's making his decision apparently sometime on Saturday afternoon. And Ohio State's in the running, Kevin, but Florida State is the direction that most people are going.
Hat on the table. I mean, that's just my opinion at this point. It's recruiting. Things change, but I don't see that one happening for Ohio State.
Is there anything else out there of note that could be coming down the commitment trail soon?
I mean, we still have to wait until August for Desmond Umeozulu, who I'm still think is trending toward Ohio State. Staying back at quarterback. Austin Novosad still has to make his decision. Committed to Baylor at this point, but has some other big offers out there. Notre Dame has made a late push in that one. I'm not ready to make a call there yet. For all the concern of how the class is falling apart, and every day I turn on the computer, there's another rumor about is Dijon Johnson slipping away? Is Jelani Thurman slipping away? You know what? Ohio State's done a great job of flipping kids in the past, and other programs are going to try to do the same. At this point, I'm not ready to back off of either of those commitments at this point. But, as we like to joke, when a kid commits, you just know who leads at that point. Nothing is binding until the kid signs. And hell, with the transfer portal now, nothing's binding, period.
I think, and thank you, Ryan, for that great comment and contribution. I think that if push comes to shove and all they have are Devin Brown and Kyle McCord after this season, they'll get into the portal and they'll find somebody who may not be able to start at a Power 5 school, but will gladly come to Ohio State to throw his helmet into the ring and compete for the job and, have a chance to play on a team that could contend for the national championship next year. I haven't looked in depth at what all Ohio State might have coming back, but it ought to be an okay team. I mean, you'll have Travion Henderson, you would think, in his third and final year. Whoever else along for the ride, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. Those are some pretty good building blocks right there that figure to be mainstays next year. So they're not falling off anytime soon. And I think if, people say that would be terrible for Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, I think they understand that you can't go into a season with just two quarterbacks. So, you're not bringing somebody in to necessarily start. You'd be bringing somebody in who would compete for the job and provide depth. And I think they'd have 20 applicants the first day that job description got out there on the waiver wire. I think they'd have guys coming out of the woodwork to transfer to Ohio State for that opportunity. I mean, you tell me you're the backup at Pittsburgh or at Kentucky and you're not going to get to play behind a pretty good guy, man, you're telling me I got a chance to go to Ohio State, and if something happened, I might have to play and, win a national championship and be on the front page of college football for a year. Well, hell yes, sign me up. So, I don't think that'd be a problem at all if that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, Ryan Day wants 4 scholarship quarterbacks. That might be a tough ask next year. And he understands that. He has done 3 before and knows that that's just how it is these days. And it's just finding the right guy and finding who understands it. And then it's the same thing with the 2023 class, finding the right guy and finding somebody who understands the situation and still is brave enough and confident enough to come to Ohio State. And when you can find those guys, then you've got something because they have that confidence. They have the kind of confidence a quarterback needs, not just to say, yeah, I can play here, but then also, I can lead a team. I've done it before. It's what I do. And that's, right now that's not very easy with Ohio State's quarterback recruiting to find somebody that can fit into this sandwich that they've got going. And if they can find somebody, if it's Brock Glenn and he does choose to be a Buckeye, that says a lot about him. And it also shores things up a little bit for the Buckeyes in terms of the quarterback room.
Next Wednesday is August 3rd, and that's also the opening of Ohio State football camp as the Buckeyes prepare for Notre Dame week 1 at September 3rd. So 1 month away from the first day of August camp. We will dice it up one day next week. We will have to get together with the 3 of these and guys in our complete schedule to figure out when we're going to present Ohio State Buckeyes live to you next week. Ryan, thank you so much for the contribution. Thanks for the awesome content to everyone. Go Bucks. Good stuff. Kevin Noon, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Huddle. Get over there, BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's going to be launched here soon, but you can dive in there and take part in the live chat immediately. And Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts247 Sports. Guys, you make it happen. Appreciate you being here. We had about 200 on the line. Most of you made it in late, so just wait for the video to post and you can catch what you missed here at Buckeyes Live. See you next week.